He came home whistling, not knowing I'd found her lipstick in his jacket pocket. I didn't cry. I made a plan. By the time he realized what I was doing, I had already left, exposed his affair, taken his company. Now, he watches from the sidelines while I live the life he never saw coming. It started with a pocket. Not a scream. Not a confession. Not a tear-streaked confrontation. Just a quiet moment at the laundry machine. I was doing the usual Sunday load. His slacks, his button-downs, the ones I dry on hangers because they're expensive, Clara. Always Claire, like a command. Like I should be grateful he reminded me of my own name. That day I reached into the pocket of his navy blazer and felt something unfamiliar. Cylindrical. Smooth. I pulled it out and stared. Lipstick. Not mine. Not even close. A rich berry shade, deep and sultry, the kind that would leave a stain on the rim of a wine glass and a man's collar. Still capped. Still warm from his body. I didn't drop it. I didn't gasp. I just stood there, one sock in my other hand and that tube of betrayal in the other. It was almost funny how something so small could be so loud. I stared at it like it might explain itself. But of course it didn't. Instead, I set it on top of the washer and finished folding the laundry. When he came home that evening, he whistled. He actually whistled. Tossed his keys into the ceramic bowl like he always did, kissed the top of my head without looking and said, "Thanks for taking care of the dry cleaning, babe. You're a lifesaver." And I smiled. Because I had already started the first step of my revenge. I didn't say a word about the lipstick. Instead, I asked about his day. Offered him dinner. Made small talk like the doting wife he always wanted. Because when you play chess, you don't scream checkmate at the first move. You play patiently. You observe the board. And you plan. I wasn't heartbroken. I was calculating. Because heartbreak implies helplessness, and I was far from helpless. That night, I tucked the lipstick back into the pocket of his blazer. Let him discover it himself in the morning. Let him wonder if I saw it. Let him wonder if I knew. Let it eat at him, like rust on the edge of a blade. The next morning, I woke up before him. Brewed his coffee. Laid out his clothes. The blazer was gone. So was the lipstick. He didn't mention it. Good. That told me everything I needed. He wasn't innocent. He wasn't careless. He was confident. Confident enough to carry the evidence of his affair in his own pocket. Confident I was too docile, too naive, too domesticated to notice. He thought I was a houseplant. Pretty. Quiet. Dependent on his sunlight. But I had roots deep enough to crack his foundation. And it was time I started growing toward the light. That day I went to a different bank. Opened a new account. In a different name. I transferred a small amount, just a taste. Just enough to test the waters. I also visited an old friend from college. Lana, now a divorce attorney. She owed me one from years ago. I didn't mention the lipstick. I didn't mention him. I just said, "Tell me what a woman needs to do if she wants to leave, but not empty-handed." She smiled. "You finally ready to play smart?" I smiled back. "I'm ready to win." After the lipstick, the veil lifted. And I started seeing it, everything, for what it really was. The Friday night meetings that never ended before midnight. The shower running as soon as he got home, even when he didn't go to the gym. The cologne that changed, subtler, sweeter, with a note of rose. And the worst one, the way he stopped looking me in the eyes. Not because he felt guilty, but because he was already looking past me. For 7 years I had been Clara Evans, wife of Ethan Evans, marketing director at a mid-sized firm with aspirations bigger than his talent. 7 years of dinner parties, golf club brunches, ironing his shirts before dawn, and pretending to laugh at his boss's jokes like my salary depended on it. Which, in a way, it did. I played the good wife. The background decoration. The perfect shadow to his spotlight. But now I was something else. Now I was watching. Every time he lied, I made a note. 9:42 p.m. I was stuck in traffic. But the traffic app showed green lights all the way from downtown. Saturday. Didn't check my phone all day, babe. But I found a receipt from a spa 30 minutes away from the house. 1 couple's massage, 1 glass of champagne. For 2. And then there was the wine. He hated red wine. Said it gave him heartburn. So why was there always a new bottle of Merlot in the recycling bin? That's when I started keeping a log. A real one. I created a hidden folder on my old tablet titled Recipe Notes. Inside were date-stamped screenshots of suspicious texts, synced locations, bank statements, and blurry photos of unfamiliar perfume bottles in his car. Not for rage. Not for revenge. For proof. Because when the day came and it would, I didn't want him to say, "You're being dramatic." Or, "It's not what you think." Or the classic, "We were on a break." No. I wanted him to see the mountain of evidence and realize he had no foothold left. There was one moment that pushed me over the edge. A Monday morning. He was in the shower singing. I was sipping my coffee, scrolling through the text he forgot to delete. One thread stood out. "You left your jacket at my place. Then just keep it. Gives me a reason to come back." Then a photo. Of him. In the mirror. Shirtless. And there on his neck was the faintest outline of lipstick. Berry red. The same shade. I put my cup down. So. Not a tear. I opened a new text thread. Not to him. To Julian West. My old rival from university. My debate partner turned tech tycoon. The man who once told me I should have gone into espionage instead of event management. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew his number by heart. I typed 3 words. "Ready to talk?" Julian and I met at a rooftop bar 2 days later. It was raining softly. He was exactly the same, sharp jaw, sharper eyes, and a look like he already knew what I'd say before I said it. He wore a black coat, no umbrella, not a drop on him. "Of course. I heard you got married," he said, sliding a scotch across the table to me. To him. I nodded. He waited. Didn't speak. Let the silence ask its own question. I pulled out my tablet. Opened the folder. Turned it to face him. He skimmed through the photos, the logs, the screenshots, his mouth twisting just slightly at the corners. Finally he looked up. "I assume this isn't just a venting session?" "I want to take him down," I said. He leaned back. Studied me. "You want to blow up his life?" "No. I want to take it apart piece by piece. Quietly. Professionally. With style." His smirk returned. "Now you're speaking my language." Julian had a long memory. He and Ethan used to be friends. Co-founders on a project back in college that never got off the ground, because Ethan stole the prototype, pitched it to an incubator alone, and left Julian in the dust. Julian never said anything publicly. He didn't need to. He built his own company and became the youngest CEO in his sector by 31. Ethan, meanwhile, was still trying to impress people with overpriced cufflinks and rehearsed speeches. Julian never forgot. Neither did I. We began to meet weekly. Always somewhere discreet. Always with a burner phone between us. I started wearing red lipstick to these meetings. The exact shade I'd found in Ethan's pocket. Julian noticed. "Symbolic?" he asked once. I smiled. "No. Territorial." He didn't ask more. We mapped out Ethan's company, his clients, contracts, financial weaknesses. Julian's team did the digging, I did the navigating. I discovered something interesting. Ethan's mistress, whom I now knew was a consultant named Camille, had recently pitched a strategic rebrand to Ethan's firm. A rebrand that Ethan approved personally. Despite her having no experience, no certifications, and no clearance. Even better, she'd been funneling ideas, some lifted straight from Julian's old prototype, into a copycat product she was pitching to a rival firm. All through Ethan's access. That was our gold mine. One ethical complaint to the board with screenshots and timelines would get Ethan disbarred from future partnerships. Maybe even sued. But that wasn't enough. I didn't want just justice. I wanted ruin. So I waited. At home I stayed the same. Sweet Claire. Helpful Clara. The wife who ironed his shirts and laughed at his jokes. I needed him to stay confident. Because confidence breeds carelessness. And carelessness is how men like Ethan destroy themselves. The morning began like any other. Ethan was in a good mood, overconfident as usual. He strutted around the kitchen, humming off-key, wearing the shirt I'd perfectly pressed. The same shirt he'd wear later when he'd accidentally CC the wrong partner on a confidential proposal. My doing, of course. "I might be up for a promotion next quarter," he said, pouring too much creamer into his coffee. "Camille said the board loves my strategy." "Camille again," I replied with a soft smile, tapping away at my laptop. "Just work stuff." "I'm sure." He didn't notice the flash drive sticking out of my USB port, the one Julian had encrypted with data from Camille's illegal siphoning activity. All time-stamped. All cross-referenced. All traced back to Ethan's logins. He kissed the top of my head just like he always did. But this time I flinched. And he noticed. "What's going on with you lately?" he asked that night. "You've been off." I looked up from my book and smiled. "Hormones, maybe." He blinked. "Wait, are you?" "No," I said calmly. "But it got your attention." He laughed it off. Typical Ethan. Panic then jokes. Never the follow-through. The next day I made a call. "Everything's ready," Julian said over a secure line. "You just give the signal." "The gala," I said. 2 weeks from now. He'll be there." Of course he would be. It was his company's annual tech showcase, where he'd be presenting the so-called innovation he'd stolen, the one Camille plagiarized from Julian's early design. Where all the investors, board members and press would be watching. Where he'd brag, smile, pose. Where I'd ruin him. But I needed to do one more thing first. I needed to leave. Quietly. But permanently. And take everything he never thought I'd have the guts to claim. That weekend while he went golfing I packed. Not suitcases. Evidence. Hard drives. Bank records. The prenup. Unsigned and invalid since he never filed it properly. A list of his personal assets, plus documents showing his fraudulent investments. Then I walked through the house one last time. The living room, where we once danced to terrible jazz on New Year's Eve. The kitchen where I had cooked him anniversary dinners while he texted Camille. The closet where his jacket still smelled like her. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a stage. And my final act was about to begin. I left him a note. Simple. Elegant. Typed. Thin. "There's lipstick in your pocket, betrayal on your hands and consequences at your doorstep. I'll be at the gala. You'll want to see what I'm wearing. Clara." I didn't go to a hotel. I went to Julian's. Not for comfort. For strategy. "Are you sure you're ready?" he asked that night, handing me a glass of wine. "I've been ready since I found that lipstick," I said. He nodded, watching me with quiet admiration. "You're not like I remembered." "Neither are you," I said, my gaze steady. "You used to be colder." Julian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You used to be softer. Maybe we're both exactly who we need to be now." He didn't reply. But his hand brushed mine as we turned back to the screen. An open file showing Ethan's entire financial history collapsing like a house of cards. The day of the gala arrived. I wore red. A deep, velvety crimson dress with a slit high enough to be noticed but tasteful enough to be dangerous. My hair was swept up, my makeup precise. And on my lips? The exact same shade of lipstick I found in his pocket. Julian walked beside me, a tailored black tux, a smirk on his lips. "You look like revenge in heels," he whispered. "That's because I am." Ethan spotted us the moment we walked in. His expression, pure disbelief. Like his past and future had walked into the same room and started slow dancing. He abandoned Camille mid-conversation to make his way toward us. "Clara," he said, his voice a mix of charm and panic. "You came. I told you I would." His eyes flicked to Julian. "You're with him." Julian extended a hand. "We've met. Years ago. You stole my pitch deck, remember?" Ethan paled. "Clara, you don't understand. Whatever you think you know." I cut him off. "They're setting up the stage for your presentation, right?" He blinked. "Yes." "Why?" I smiled. "Because I had them swap your slides with mine." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "You did what?" "You'll see," I said, turning toward the crowd. He grabbed my arm. "What are you doing, Clara?" "Showing the truth. You'll want to stay seated for this." And then I walked away. The lights dimmed. A hush fell across the grand ballroom of the Sterling Tech Gala. Investors, executives, and media personnel turned toward the main stage, expecting Ethan's smug voice and another recycled pitch dressed up in buzzwords. Instead, the screen lit up with a slow zoom into a familiar corporate logo. His company's. But not his deck. Because I had already been backstage hours earlier, working with the AV team and slipping them a flash drive under the name Mrs. Clara Evans. Funny how being his wife finally opened the doors he always told me I wasn't qualified to walk through. A new title slide appeared. Innovation or Infiltration. A case study in fraud. Gasps. A few scattered chuckles. People thought it was satire. Then the second slide showed a name. Camille Royce. Independent consultant / former intern / unauthorized data contractor. Julian's voice echoed across the room through the PA. Good evening, everyone. Before tonight's scheduled presentation, we wanted to open with a demonstration. Not of technology but of integrity. He stepped onto the stage. Lethal imposter. And what happens when both are compromised? Ethan stood frozen beside me, his face ghost white. You switched my deck? He hissed under his breath. No, I whispered sweetly. I upgraded it. On screen, Julian clicked to the next slide. An email thread. Between Ethan and Camille. Talking about mirroring Julian's early model, and using language vague enough to dodge lawsuits. The room was silent. Then came the financial spreadsheets. Money funneled to Camille's company through a consultancy retainer. Dated within days of Ethan's firm greenlighting her project. Finally, side-by-side comparisons of Julian's old prototype pitch and Camille's latest demo. It was damning. Bulletproof. By the time Julian finished, no one was clapping. They were stunned. Whispering. Texting. Filming. Now, Julian said, before the official team takes the stage, we'll leave you with one last slide. The lights dimmed again. A video clip played. Security footage from a hotel lobby. Ethan. Camille. Kissing in the elevator. The timestamp matched a date he had told me he was working late on a client pitch. Julian stepped off the stage. I stepped on. I didn't have a microphone. I didn't need one. The cameras found me anyway. I'm Clara Evans, I said. Soon to be Clara Nothing. Because while my husband was pitching lies and stealing futures, I was collecting facts. The spotlight hit Ethan. Some of you called me his better half. But tonight I'd like to reintroduce myself as the smarter half. A ripple of laughter. Ethan tried to speak, tried to walk toward me. Security blocked him. I turned back to the audience. My only regret was ever wasting my intelligence supporting his ego. But that ends now. My name may not be on the company's letterhead, but it'll be on the lawsuit. Mic drop? No. Just one final turn of the knife. I stepped down, walked toward Julian, and took his hand. Behind us, Ethan's world crumbled. Executives stepped away from him. Board members made calls. Camille was nowhere in sight. By the time we left the gala, Ethan was trending, for all the wrong reasons. Julian and I rode the elevator up to his penthouse suite in silence. When the doors closed behind us, he poured 2 glasses of champagne. To precision, he said. To control, I replied. We clinked glasses. Then he looked at me differently. Not with strategy. With something else. Did you mean it? He asked. What you said on stage about regrets? I held his gaze. I meant every word. Julian stepped closer. His voice dropped. And what about new beginnings? I didn't smile. I didn't joke. I just leaned in. And kissed him. The kiss wasn't part of the plan. But it wasn't a mistake either. It felt like claiming something that had always been meant for me, but that I'd been too distracted, too obedient, too married to notice. Julian wasn't a rebound. He was a reset. Not a man who wanted to own me. A man who wanted to build with me. The next morning, headlines exploded. Tech scandal rocks Sterling Gala. Wife exposes husband's affair and fraud in viral mic drop moment. Julian West reclaims legacy, teams up with former rival's wife. And buried between the lines? A quiet transfer of company shares. A resignation letter. An NDA Camille couldn't afford to breach. Ethan was done. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. You'd think after what happened at the gala, Ethan would disappear quietly. Accept his loss. Fade into the background. But men like Ethan don't go quietly. They spiral. They beg. They threaten. They self-destruct. And I made sure to give him every chance to do it with flair. 3 days after the gala, he showed up outside Julian's building. Unshaven. Sleepless. Red-eyed with either rage or regret, maybe both. He stood by the concierge desk demanding to see me. She's with me now, Julian said smoothly, appearing behind him like a shadow. I just want to talk to her, Ethan barked. You should talk to your lawyer instead, Julian replied. You'll need him. Ethan turned toward me as I stepped off the elevator. Claire, please. That wasn't how it was supposed to happen. I tilted my head. What was supposed to happen, Ethan? You lie, cheat, steal, and I sit quietly and let you humiliate me. He took a step closer. Security tensed. I was going to leave her. I didn't love her. But you respected her enough to give her my time, my money, and my jacket. He froze. I turned to the security guard. Escort him out. Politely, for now. As they led him away, Ethan shouted over his shoulder, "You can't do this to me. I made you." Julian chuckled beside me. "I think you just made her dangerous." The next few weeks were quiet. For me. For Ethan, not so much. His firm's board launched an internal audit. His investors pulled out, most discreetly, some very loudly. Camille went radio silent and disappeared to some beach in Greece, leaving Ethan to deal with the fallout alone. Every message he sent, voicemails, emails, texts, I saved. Not because I cared. Because I knew how to turn desperation into leverage. Meanwhile, Julian and I became the power couple Ethan had pretended we were. We launched a new brand together. A platform built on transparency, ethics, and innovation. A direct competitor to Ethan's sinking company. The press loved it. Especially the story behind it. She found lipstick in his pocket. Now she's building a tech empire with the man he betrayed. We were everywhere. Forbes. TechCrunch. The cover of Innovate magazine. And Ethan was begging his accountant to stall foreclosure on his condo. Then came the real kill shot. Julian got an offer. One of Ethan's biggest clients wanted to join our platform. But they had concerns. PR concerns. I smiled. Let me handle it. I invited the client to a soft launch event. And I made sure to invite one other person. Ethan. He arrived thinking it was an ambush. He wasn't wrong. I walked over in a white suit. Power-dressed. Hair pulled back. Lips crimson. He looked me up and down, disbelief in his eyes. You planned this. All of it, I said calmly. Why? I leaned in. Because you never thought I would. Then I turned, raised my glass, and introduced the client to Julian. They shook hands. And Ethan? He walked out. Alone. Later that night, I sat by the window of Julian's penthouse, watching the city. He joined me with 2 glasses of wine. You've been quiet, he said. I'm thinking. About Ethan? No, I said. About what's next. Julian watched me closely. And what is next? I smiled. Everything he told me I couldn't have. Ethan sent one last email a week later. A long one. Rambling. Regretful. Clearly written while drunk. He said he missed me. That Camille had meant nothing. That he saw me differently now. As someone powerful. Fearless. Respected. He finally saw the real me. The irony? That woman only existed because he buried the first one. I didn't reply. I just forwarded it to my lawyer for the divorce file. The day the divorce finalized, I signed the papers in a room overlooking the skyline. Julian waited outside. As I stepped into the hallway, he offered his hand. So, he said, how does it feel to be free? Like I'm just getting started. He grinned. Good. Because I have a question. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring. Not flashy. Not gaudy. Elegant. Strong. Like everything I'd become. When I said yes to Julian's proposal, it wasn't a moment of escape. It was a decision. One built not on pain but clarity. Not on rebound but rebirth. I wasn't marrying him to prove a point. I was marrying him because we were building something real, built on power, trust, and shared history. Still, Ethan wouldn't let go. The night the engagement announcement went live, just a subtle post on Julian's company page, Ethan lost whatever restraint he had left. It started with a call at 2 a.m. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. And another. By morning there were 11 missed calls and 4 voicemails. Each one more desperate than the last. Claire, please. Just talk to me. You were never like this. You weren't cold. He's using you. You're making a mistake. I forwarded them to my lawyer. 2 days later, Ethan showed up at my old workplace. Despite me having left weeks ago. He cornered my former assistant, asking where I was. He called me shaken. He looked ruined, she said. Like someone pulled the floor out from under him. They did, I said calmly. I did. I finally saw him again at a charity gala Julian and I were hosting. Black tie, all eyes on us, and I wore a gown stitched in confidence in crimson silk. Ethan was outside. Not invited. Not dressed for the event. But waiting. He stepped into my path like a ghost materializing out of memory. Clara, he said, voice cracked and raw. Can we talk? Julian turned to me. Do you want me to? No, I said. Let him speak. We walked to a quiet corner near the valet. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. You're not her anymore, he whispered. I never was, I said. You just never looked long enough to see me. He shook his head, almost laughing. You planned all of it, didn't you? The gala. The switch. The launch. Yes, I said. Down to the lipstick. He went still. You knew? He asked, voice barely audible. From the moment I pulled it out of your jacket. He closed his eyes like he'd been shot. I was stupid. Yes, I agreed. I made a mistake. No, I said. You made many. The mistake was thinking I wouldn't find out. That I wouldn't fight back. That I wouldn't thrive without you. His eyes shimmered, rimmed red. Do you still think about us? He asked, voice breaking. Do you ever miss it? I stepped closer, close enough for him to smell my perfume, to feel the weight of everything he lost. I miss the version of me you destroyed, I said. But not once have I missed you. Then I turned my back. For good. That was the last time I saw Ethan in person. He tried to claw his way back into relevance. Apologies to the board, desperate rebranding, even public tears in an interview that nobody watched. But the world had already moved on. So had I. Julian and I got married 6 months later. Private. Elegant. A vineyard in Italy with only 30 guests. No press. No drama. My gown was hand-stitched champagne gold with no train, because I wasn't dragging anything behind me anymore. We wrote our own vows. Julian said, you turned your pain into a sword. Now let me be your shield. And I told him, thank you for seeing the fire in me, when someone else tried to smother it. At the reception, under fairy lights and Tuscan skies, my phone buzzed. One last email. From Ethan. Subject. Please read this. Claire. You didn't just leave me. You erased me. I can't walk into a room without hearing your name. You're everywhere. In every article, every pitch meeting, every boardroom I once thought belonged to me. How did you become her? And why didn't I see her when I had you? I miss you. Please don't marry him. Please don't forget me. I can change. I have. Come home. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed the tab and turned to Julian, who raised his glass. To letting go of the past, he said. I smiled. To making it regret ever touching us. There's a certain silence that comes after revenge. Not peace. Not emptiness. Just stillness. Like the world pausing to watch what you do next. I had everything people dream of after heartbreak. A powerful husband, my own company, wealth, visibility, and a name no one could speak without respect. But what they didn't know was that the revenge wasn't the end. It was the middle. Because there was one final truth Ethan never saw coming. Months after our wedding, I received a call from Lana, my lawyer and closest friend through all of it. You might want to sit down, she said, her voice tight. Give me the short version. Camille's pregnant. I blinked. What? And she's suing Ethan. Claims he promised her equity, support, a future. Says he misled her. She has texts. Audio. I almost laughed. He went back to her? No. She claims he never left. I poured myself a drink. Let the shark circle. Lana exhaled. That's not all. I paused. She says he proposed. And used your old ring. That's when I stopped laughing. I remembered the ring. My original engagement ring from Ethan. Platinum band, oval diamond, a little too big, always slipping. I'd left it in the box when I moved out. Apparently he hadn't returned it. He'd recycled it. Used it on her. The same woman whose lipstick had exposed it all. The irony was almost poetic. I told Julian everything that night as we sat in our garden under stars he'd named in software code. He didn't get angry. He got still. He really doesn't understand boundaries, he muttered. No. He understands ownership, I said. He thinks every woman he touches belongs to him, forever. Julian nodded. Let me show you something. He pulled out his laptop, opened a folder marked contingency. It was filled with legal documents, witness statements, shell company transaction records, all centered on Ethan's post-scandal dealings. You've been watching him? I asked. Not watching, Julian said. Tracking. I knew he wouldn't stop. I just didn't expect him to self-destruct so fast. I stared at the screen. My old engagement ring gleamed in one of Camille's selfies. Now viral, now mocked. I want it, I whispered. The ring. No, I said slowly. The company. We launched the takeover quietly. Ethan's company, crippled after the fraud scandal, hemorrhaging clients and now facing Camille's lawsuit, was ripe for a buyout. And Julian, ever the tactician, didn't make the offer under his name. He used a trust. Disguised, silent, clean. And I was listed as the trust's sole beneficiary. When the board, desperate for cash, approved the sale, Ethan wasn't even in the room. He found out 2 days later. I waited until the paperwork was finalized. Then I scheduled a board meeting. Ethan stormed in like he still had a right to be there. What the hell is this? He barked. Why is she here? I stood at the head of the table in a black suit, sleeves sharp, heels louder than his voice. Because I own the company now. His jaw unhinged. You're lying. I slid the contract toward him. Page 12. Read the fine print. He flipped. Froze. I didn't just leave you, Ethan, I said. I took back everything I helped you build. No. I own the very ground you stand on. Security escorted him out when he screamed. It was the most satisfying silence I've ever heard. His voice disappearing down the hall, replaced by the click of my pen signing his final removal. Later that day I walked into his old office. I didn't sit. I just stood at the window and looked out over the city. Julian joined me. So, he said, was that the final checkmate? I turned to him. It wasn't checkmate. He raised an eyebrow. It was reclamation. 2 days later a ring box arrived at my office. My old engagement ring. No note. Just the cold metal symbol of everything Ethan had wasted. I walked it straight to the rooftop terrace and dropped it into the fountain. A ripple. A splash. Gone. That night, as Julian and I hosted a private celebration, a journalist pulled me aside. Tell me, Clara, she said, eyes glittering with curiosity, what would you say to the woman who finds lipstick in her partner's pocket tomorrow morning? I smiled. Don't confront him, I said. Outgrow him. And I walked away. Revenge was never the goal. Freedom was. But when you've lived in someone else's shadow long enough, stepping into your own light feels like vengeance. And when your second love shines brighter than your first heartbreak, the world notices. So did Ethan. Especially when the headlines changed. Clara West, from CEO's wife to empire builder in her own right. She left her cheating husband. Now she's worth more than his entire board. Love, loss and leverage. Clara West and the art of the comeback. I didn't read them all. But I saw my name climbing from footnotes to front covers. Not because I chased the spotlight, but because I stopped shrinking away from it. Julian never tried to outshine me. He stood beside me. Sometimes behind me when I needed the room. That was the real twist. The second love wasn't a rebound. It was the reward. I still got messages from Ethan now and then. Not often. Not directly. A forwarded email here. A muttered apology through mutual acquaintances there. Camille had left. Apparently the pregnancy had been a bluff. She disappeared with what remained of his savings and sold her side of the story to a gossip blog. He was renting now. In his mother's house. Without equity. Without dignity. They say people can hit rock bottom and change. But the truth is, some people only change when you're no longer there to witness it. Julian and I kept building. Together we launched a mentorship program for young women in tech. We expanded our platform into international markets. We bought out 2 of Ethan's former partner companies and rebranded them with new leadership. But my favorite victory? The day I walked into the boardroom of my own firm, where all of the founding partners were women. We weren't tokens anymore. We were leaders. One evening, as Julian and I shared a quiet moment in our garden, he reached over and laced his fingers through mine. I've been thinking, he said, about that night. The gala. The lipstick, I said smiling. He nodded. If you hadn't found it, would any of this have happened? I leaned back, staring at the stars. I think I would have still grown, I said softly. But I wouldn't have burned as brightly. Julian turned to me. Do you regret the fire? No, I said. I regret letting it burn for someone who never deserved its warmth. People ask me sometimes if I'd do it all again. If I'd leave Ethan. If I'd orchestrate the fall. If I'd marry Julian. The answer? Every time without hesitation. Yes. Because revenge wasn't the end of my story. It was the prologue. The real story began when I stopped being Ethan's wife. And became Clara West. Not his mistake. Not his loss. But my own empire. Built not from lipstick stains. But from legacy. The end.